When the doctor told me the baby I'd carried for 7 months wasn't biologically mine, I laughed. Actually laughed, like it was the setup to some cruel joke. 10 minutes later, my husband looked at me like he didn't recognize my face anymore, and I finally understood. Nothing about this day was a joke at all. My name is Claire Bennett. I'm 36, 7 months pregnant, and until that Tuesday I believed the hardest part of my life was behind me. 4 years of failed pregnancies, 2 rounds of IVF, more grief than I thought I'd survive. This baby was supposed to be my happy ending. It started with a call 2 days earlier. "Mrs. Bennett, there's an anomaly in your prenatal genetic panel," the nurse said, calm in that trained way that comes right before your world tilts. "We'd like you to come in." I sat across from Dr. Whitfield, Mark's hand clenched around mine, both of us braced for something medical, something survivable. "The panel shows the baby's DNA markers are inconsistent with Mark being the biological father." I laughed, a short, disbelieving bark. "That's not possible. We did IVF. You know that." "Say it again," Mark interrupted. "Slower." "She did." This time it landed like a verdict. Mark's hand went rigid in mine. When I turned to him, something had already shifted behind his eyes. "Claire," he said quietly. "Whose is it?" 4 words. 11 years of marriage, and he asked me that. I wanted to scream that I'd never touched another man, that I'd bled and begged and injected myself with hormones for this exact child. Instead, I just sat there while one cold thought circled louder than everything else. If I hadn't been unfaithful, and there hadn't been a lab error, then whose baby was actually growing inside me? I had no idea that this appointment was the first domino in a chain about to expose a stranger's secret, a company's cover-up, and a piece of my own husband's past neither of us saw coming. We didn't speak the entire drive home. Mark's knuckles were bleached white on the wheel. I stared out the window, one hand pressed over the belly of a baby I already loved and no longer understood. Inside, the silence broke sharper. "I need you to be honest," Mark said. "If something happened on a work trip." "Nothing happened." My voice cracked. "I have given this marriage everything. Every needle, every failed test, every night crying on the bathroom floor, and you're asking if I cheated." "Then explain it." "Science just told me something neither of us can explain." We stood in the kitchen where we'd once celebrated 2 pink lines, both crying now for entirely different reasons. "It's the lab," I said. "It has to be. Mistakes happen." Mark exhaled hard, fear sharpening into resolve. "Then we prove it. We don't fall apart over one result." I nodded, grateful for anything solid. That night, lying rigid beside him, I kept replaying the flicker of doubt I'd seen in his eyes at the doctor's office. Not gone. Just waiting. My phone buzzed at 11:47 p.m. Unknown number. I almost let it ring out. Something made me answer. "Mrs. Bennett." A woman's voice, hushed, urgent. "Stop asking questions about your case. For your own sake, and your baby's, let this go." The line went dead before I could say a word. I sat there in the dark, phone still pressed to my ear, heart slamming against my ribs. Someone already knew exactly what had happened to me. And they were terrified I'd find out too. We requested an independent test the next morning. No connection to Dr. Whitfield's office. I didn't tell Mark about the call yet. I needed to understand it myself first. 3 days later, the genetic counselor's results deepened the anomaly instead of explaining it. "Both parental markers are inconsistent with the parents on file," she said. Where did you complete your IVF cycle? Meadowbrook Fertility Center. 4 years ago. A pause. Slightly too long. Request your full treatment file. Every embryo, every transfer date. The response came back within hours, fast and unusually cold. A form letter. A request for a phone call instead of documents. And beneath it, a signature. Gregory Ashford, Chief Operations Officer, Meadowbrook, Coastal Fertility Network. I searched his name that night, hands shaking on the keyboard. A Business Journal article popped up first, 8 months old. Ashford named EVP following successful coastal reproductive merger, delivered 3 months ahead of schedule. 3 months ahead of schedule. I thought about the call. Stop asking questions, for your own sake. I thought about a merger deadline important enough to build a career on. And I thought, a chill spreading through my chest, what exactly had been rushed to make that deadline happen? I hadn't met Gregory Ashford yet. Something told me he was about to become the center of everything. Our attorney, Diane Okafor, got us a meeting with Meadowbrook's medical director within the week. Ashford himself refused to appear. Dr. Patel greeted us with careful, practiced warmth. 4 years ago, our clinic was mid-merger, consolidating storage with Coastal Reproductive Sciences. That included archived sperm donations going back over 15 years. She turned to Mark. Mr. Bennett, did you ever donate before your marriage? Possibly in college. Mark went pale. Almost 18 years ago. I needed tuition money. It was anonymous. It was archived at Coastal, Dr. Patel said. During the rushed migration, a labeling error caused a previously created embryo, your old donor sample, combined with an egg from another patient, to be mistakenly implanted during Claire's cycle. Silence. Whose egg? I finally managed. Privacy protections limit what I can disclose, she said carefully. What I can tell you is the egg came from Coastal's fertility preservation program, a young cancer patient who froze her eggs before chemotherapy over a decade ago. A decade. Frozen, waiting, because she'd been told chemo might take away any future chance at the child I was now carrying for her without her knowledge. Something twisted in my chest that wasn't only fear. Somewhere out there was a woman who might still believe she'd never get to be a mother, while I sat here, 7 months pregnant with what might be, biologically, her only child. Mark had gone very quiet. Too quiet. Mark, what is it? He didn't answer. And that silence terrified me more than anything Dr. Patel had said. Mark. I gripped his arm. You're scaring me. He finally looked up, eyes wet in a way I'd only seen once before, the day his father died. The timing, he said. Cancer, fertility preservation, Coastal, a decade ago. Claire, I think I know who that egg might belong to. My stomach dropped. What are you talking about? Before you. College. I dated someone for almost 3 years. Vanessa. Her name came out careful, almost reverent. She had ovarian cancer at 22. Froze her eggs before chemo. I drove her to that exact clinic myself. It's changed names twice since. The room tilted again. You're telling me the woman who might be this baby's biological mother is your ex-girlfriend? I don't know for certain, but the timeline fits too perfectly to be coincidence. Something ugly rose in my chest, not just fear now, something sharper. Jealousy, irrational given everything else, tangled with dread. Somewhere out there was a woman who'd once shared a life with my husband, whose name he still said with tenderness, and whose biological child I might be carrying. Did you love her? I heard myself ask, absurdly, in the middle of everything else collapsing. Mark met my eyes. I loved who I was at 20. This has nothing to do with you and me now. I wanted to believe him completely. But sitting there, hand on my belly, I wasn't sure nothing to do with us was true anymore. I didn't sleep, running one sentence on a loop. My husband's ex-girlfriend might be the biological mother of my child. Done waiting on lawyers and doctors, I drove to Meadowbrook's corporate office myself and demanded to see Gregory Ashford. His assistant tried to turn me away. I sat in that lobby 2 hours until he gave me 5 minutes. Ashford was younger than I expected, sharply dressed, radiating the calm of a man who'd never faced real consequences. "Mrs. Bennet," he said, not quite rising, "I understand you're upset." Upset? You mixed up my embryo with a stranger's egg because you rushed a merger. There was an isolated administrative anomaly during a complex systems integration, he said smoothly, like he'd rehearsed it. I'd caution against conclusions that aren't medically or legally substantiated. Emotional. You mean hysterical. Your words, not mine. He slid a folder across the desk, a settlement offer, an NDA clipped to it. A generous resolution, given the circumstances. I didn't touch it. I'm not signing anything. His composure didn't crack, but something colder moved behind his eyes. That would be a mistake, Mrs. Bennet. I stood to leave, hands trembling with fury I hadn't fully felt until that exact moment. On my way out, I passed his assistant's desk and caught a manila folder half-tucked under a stack of papers. A name was visible on the tab, R. Alvarez, personnel file, flagged. Renata's last name, filed away like a threat someone had already been managing. I didn't slow down, but I didn't forget it either. Diane didn't waste time once I told her about the flagged folder. R. Alvarez, she repeated. Let's find her. It took 2 days to track down Renata Alvarez, no longer at Coastal, now working a quiet lab job 2 states away. When Diane's investigator reached her, she didn't hesitate long. I've been waiting 3 years for someone to ask the right questions, she said, meeting us at a diner outside her town, hands wrapped around coffee she didn't drink. I filed 2 written complaints during the merger. Ashford dismissed both personally. Do you have proof? Diane asked. Renata pulled an old phone from her bag. I recorded our last meeting. I didn't think anyone would believe me otherwise. She pressed play. Ashford's voice, tinny but unmistakable, filled the booth. I don't care about 4 mismatched samples, Renata. We close this merger Friday. If a few families never notice, that's not our problem to advertise. The diner went silent around us. My hands shook too hard to hold my cup. 4 families. He'd known. Not suspected, known, and decided our devastation was an acceptable cost for closing on schedule. Why now? I asked. Why give this to us after 3 years of silence? Renata's eyes filled. Because I found out there were at least 4 of you. I let fear keep me quiet while real people lived with what I already knew. I'm done being quiet. Diane sealed the phone into an evidence bag with the precision of someone who already knew exactly what it was worth. I looked at Renata and felt something shift, not just anger now, but the first solid ground I'd stood on in weeks. We finally had him. Renata's documents confirmed a name I'd been half dreading, half needing to hear. Case file 4471-C. 11 years earlier, Vanessa R. Cole, age 22, ovarian cancer, fertility preservation before chemotherapy. I sat with that name 2 full days before I let myself search it. Vanessa lived 3 hours away, teaching elementary art. I rewrote the email a dozen times before sending something simple. My name is Claire Bennett. I think we need to talk about something that connects both our lives in a way neither of us chose. We met at a park halfway between our towns. She was smaller than I expected, arms crossed against the wind. I need you to know, she said before I'd even sat. I froze those eggs so I could have a chance at motherhood myself one day. Chemo took that chance 2 years later. And now you're telling me a piece of it was used, without my knowledge, inside someone else's body. Her voice cracked, grief I recognized, having carried my own version of it for 4 years. I'm not here to take anything from you, I said. I'm here because you deserve the truth, and because you should have a say in whether you want any place in her life. Her phone buzzed. She frowned, then turned it toward me. An email from a law firm representing Meadowbrook. Ms. Cole, given the unauthorized use of your genetic material, you may have significant independent legal standing separate from the Bennett family. We'd welcome discussing your options. My stomach went cold. They weren't trying to make this right. They were trying to turn us against each other. Vanessa read the email twice, then looked up sharper than before. They think I'll sue you. Or them, but really, they think if I'm angry enough, this gets messy for everyone but them. Are you going to? I braced myself. No. Immediate, firm. I spent 11 years believing chemo took away my only chance at this. I'm not letting the company that hid it from both of us decide what I do with that now. Something eased in my chest, relief, solidarity, an unexpected kinship with a woman I'd been quietly afraid of days earlier. Then help me finish this properly, I said. Not lawsuits against each other. The truth out loud, where they can't control it. 2 days later, Diane, Vanessa, Renata, and I sat with investigative reporter Priya Shah, laying out documents, the recording, Vanessa's case file. The story ran 3 days later. Fertility giant knowingly rushed merger, ignored warnings that led to multiple embryo mix-ups. By morning, Meadowbrook coastal stock had dropped sharply, and 2 more affected families had come forward publicly. Ashford called me himself, voice tight in a way I'd never heard. You have no idea what you've done. I have exact idea, I said. You told Renata 4 families didn't matter. Now the whole country knows their names. This isn't over, Mrs. Bennett. No, I said, steadier than I'd felt in weeks. It's just started being over for you. I hung up first, the first time in this entire nightmare I'd ended the conversation. The fallout moved fast. Within a week, the board placed Ashford on leave pending investigation. Within a month, it became a criminal referral for evidence suppression and regulatory violations. Renata's recording was only the beginning. 2 more employees came forward once they saw she hadn't been destroyed for speaking up. The settlement became the largest fertility malpractice case in the state's history, split among 6 affected families, including a fund established in Vanessa's name for the unauthorized use of her genetic material. Money she quietly redirected toward a scholarship for young cancer patients pursuing fertility preservation of their own. Renata was hired within months as a safety consultant for a national fertility oversight board, finally rewarded instead of punished for the warnings that once cost her everything. Vanessa and I kept talking, carefully, without any document forcing it. She wasn't the baby's mother in any way that mattered, she said so herself, gently, but she asked, quietly, if she could someday be something like an honorary aunt, present but never intrusive. Only if you want that, she said. Only if it never feels complicated for you. I told her, surprising myself, it already feels less complicated than almost everything else these past 2 months. That night, 8.5 months into the most complicated pregnancy either of us could have imagined, I let myself believe the worst part was over. I had no idea my daughter had other plans for the timing. My water broke at 2 a.m., 3 weeks early, the same night the final settlement documents were filed. Mark drove faster than I'd ever seen, one hand on the wheel, the other gripping mine through every contraction. 11 hours later, they placed her on my chest, small, red-faced, impossibly loud for something so tiny. Every fear I'd carried for 2 months dissolved into something I hadn't expected to feel so completely. She didn't look like a lawsuit, or a cover-up, or a stranger's decade-old grief. She looked like my daughter. "Hi," I whispered, tears streaming as her tiny fingers curled around mine. "I'm your mom. I've been waiting for you for a really long time." Mark kissed the top of my head, then hers. "We both have." We named her Adeline. Addie, for short. Vanessa visited 2 weeks later, hesitant at the door until I pulled her inside myself. She held Addie for exactly 4 minutes, tears sliding silently down her face, before handing her back. "She's beautiful," Vanessa said. "And so clearly, completely yours." Ashford's case moves slowly through the courts now. Renata's new protocols have already prevented a similar incident at another clinic. Vanessa sends Addie a hand-painted card every few months, an aunt from a chapter of our story none of us chose, but all of us made peace with. If you'd asked me a year ago whether I could love a child this fiercely while carrying this much complicated history, I wouldn't have believed you. But I've learned something I couldn't have learned any other way. The greatest miracle wasn't that I became a mother. It was discovering that love can be stronger than biology, stronger than a stranger's mistake, and stronger than every fear I carried to get here. If you found out, after 7 months, that the baby you were carrying wasn't biologically yours, would you still raise that child as your own, no matter what anyone else said? If Claire's story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more emotional journeys like hers.